What's up, everybody? This is AJAC, and this is the golden age of Broscience podcast, episode 1, season 1. So I'm going to launch right into this. I'll mention sponsors and everything else at the end in the show notes. But I have someone with me that I've been wanting to talk to for a long time who came onto the scene of Health X a few years ago and is very clearly a very educated, intelligent, and fascinating guy, Greg Mushen. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's Mushen.
Mushen.
But
Greg
any
Mushen.
pronunciation works. People mess it up all the time.
That's okay. We want to get it right. Greg Mushen. All right, Greg. So you're here. Good to talk to you, brother.
Likewise.
I have a long list of questions for you, but why don't I start this off? How would you like to introduce yourself with your background?
Oh yeah. So I spent most of my career in tech, working in different functions in tech, and also grew up in a medical family. And so my dad was an MD, my mom was a nurse, and we had a big medical library. So I was always asking my dad questions, and he would answer me, and not really talk down to me. So that kind of got my first taste into it, into really liking it. My dad was always running N=1 experiments as I was growing up, even in like the 80s. So I really saw that. And so, my whole life I've been interested in health, but the last couple of years that really changed. I got pretty sick with mold illness, and was just realizing that I just cannot take that for granted. Around the same time, I went to a wedding, and the bride's father wasn't there, and I have a 9-year-old daughter. I'm 49, and that really hit me. And I'm like, I really need to get more serious about this because I don't want her to be at the altar and me not be there.
That hits heavy. I remember, I'm trying to think back to when, you mentioned mold illness, which I like to talk about. I know you had posted, I think maybe this was your most viral post, but like a before and after of yourself, like sort of like start of the journey, and then like so many months later, and you look great. Shoulders are capped, lean. Like, yeah, this is an awesome kind of transformation. So your health journey, like it started with mold illness. How did you go about getting that diagnosed?
Gosh, it was really hard. Yeah. Because I just wasn't feeling well, and wasn't really finding a lot of the answers. Just by sheer coincidence, one of my friends, my old doctor who I used to see, who'd moved away, just randomly texted me. It was like, "Hey, any chance you'd like to chat?" And he just wanted to chat as friends. And so I told him what was happening, and luckily, he'd had experience with mold, and so after a couple months, he was able to diagnose it.
So this was what, like 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago?
It was about 3 years ago. Yeah.
3 years ago. And then were you obviously you're in your 40s now? Were you as a teenager? Were you a bro as a teenager? Were you really into lifting, fitness, or did that come about later on? I'm always curious how people enter into the fray of becoming a health conscious.
I was a competitive tennis player, actually.
Okay.
And so I started playing tennis when I was 7, and it was pretty much all I did. When I was in high school, I started lifting, but I was always really active. If I wasn't playing tennis, I was doing something outside, riding bikes, building forts, skateboarding, snowboarding in the winter. In my 20s and early 30s, also really active. I was doing a lot of alpine rock climbing, and
cool.
And then snowboarding in the winter, and that's pretty much all I did. So when I had my daughter, I think things changed a little bit, and I was really kind of into work mode, and then also father mode. And so I made the mistake of kind of taking that fitness for granted that I kind of had my entire life. And when I got the mold illness, that just really sealed things for me. It's like I cannot take this for granted anymore. And so I just so happened to be at one of my friend, really good friend. He's on X too. His name is Real PJ Glassy is his handle, but it was his I believe his 58th birthday, and the guy is he is shredded. He's almost 60, and you would not believe that he's almost 60 and is one of the most fit people I've ever met. He used to be one of the top tower runners in the world.
Oh, wow.
Of all things. Yeah. But I went to his birthday, and our friend John who was just one of the most hilarious people. For some reason, he was barefoot in the bar, but he came running over and he was like, "Hey, Greg, do you want to get ripped?" And it was so funny. That was the first thing that he said to me. And I was like, "Actually, yes, I do." And he'd been coaching for like First Form, and they have these body transformations. And so like PJ, John and I joined that competition, and we were all like really encouraging each other and trying to lose body fat, and we work out all the time together. So having those two was like foundational to changing.
I mean, social support. I've done a lot of like fat loss coaching groups over the years, a lot of coaching, but the social support aspect always makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it sure does. We were texting each other every day. There was just no comparison for it.
So when you're going through transformation, like since you had that whole thread recently, you posted about walking and sort of like the Hasda and like the ability for walking to potentially increase VO2 max. At that point in time where it's like, okay, I'm going to commit myself to a transformation. I'm going to get fit. Did you already consider yourself to have a pretty good baseline knowledge of training, physiology, strength building, muscle?
Like I had a pretty good baseline knowledge of it. But John was really helpful, and he was coaching people, and PJ has been a trainer for decades. So I had them to reach out to for a lot of questions and learned a ton from them. But you mentioned that like the Hadza and like my fascination with walking.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it started. I remember talking to John, and he was like, "Yeah, I walk at least 10,000 steps per day." And I was like, "Well, could I walk more? Like, what would happen if I did like 17?" And he was like, "Yeah, do 17 if you can." And so I was walking 17,000 steps every day, and I just could not believe how much better I felt. And I remember, that time just seeing kind of fat melting off my body. And I just had a lot of time, thinking during that time. And I remember it was summer in Seattle. And summers in Seattle, I think it's like one of the best places on earth, in my opinion. It's warm. It's not too warm. It's beautiful water everywhere. And I remember walking by these houses, and it was a beautiful night, and you'd see people inside just watching TV. And I remember thinking at that point in time, I'm so glad I'm not in there watching TV. I'm so glad I'm like out here walking and getting lean, and like this is what I want to do. So I think that walking, just having so much time, seeing how it impacted my health positively, seeing the fat come off, that was kind of like the start of my fascination with walking.
Gotcha. Since like, would you say that was a start of like, since you've had a lot of what I call like, I say this like in the most complimentary way possible, like a lot of really good Broscience deep dives that you've done.
Oh yeah.
On various topics over like the past year. Was that was like the walking the start of it, or were you one of those guys where you would rabbit hole in a subject even before that?
Oh yeah, I've rabbit holed my entire life on the subject, and I just love it. If I see a rabbit hole, chances are I'll dive down it. But yeah, I think where those started was I think my interest in nutrients, and so I've been feeling really flat, and I was telling my doctor about it, the same guy who helped me with the mold, and for whatever reason, we were just testing some things. And he's like, let's test your copper. Let's just see if you have like low copper. It turns out I had like low copper. I took some copper, felt like amazing. Like everything came back. And I was like, wow, like nutrients are really important. Like what else am I missing? And so I remember just kind of like making a list of all of them and doing deep dives on all of them. And then like tuning my diet to make sure that I was like getting the right kind, the right form. So I remember doing that for just like months.
Cool. Okay, that's super cool. Like what was it's obviously you have a background as a programmer, correct?
Yeah, a programmer and product manager.
Yeah, so like what were the frameworks you used when you were kind of doing like your investigation? Since obviously you weren't just probably opening up a Wikipedia article and just I'm just gonna go read about it. Like was there sort of you're like a scientific method model of like how you set about to organize what you're learning?
Yeah, well, I've kind of developed one over the years. It's probably better to talk about that because it's a little bit more advanced. But what I typically do, I think one thing that's interesting about tech is you typically have like big systems that you have to learn, and you can never know every detail of them because there might be thousands of people working on these things. You can never know it all. But if you know how everything integrates, how everything connects, then it's like you have 10x the power. You know exactly how things are working. And so I think that that's kind of like my tendency to start thinking about things as systems.
Okay.
And so a lot of times that's where I'll start, is like trying to understand the system at a high level, and I'll try to find like a review that explains everything. And then I'll do kind of deep dives from there. I try to use almost all primary research, so I'll find papers on that. I have a custom GPT that I wrote that will do like checks of the methods, checks of the stat sig, things like that. So I'll check them all individually, and then I'll read them, go for a walk for about 45 minutes or so, just to kind of have things gel in my mind. And then I'll come back and write. I try not to take notes at all. I do it all from my phone, because I feel like if I take notes, then I'll rely on those notes, and I just want to understand the system, and it kind of forces me to do it. So yeah, that's the basic process.
That's super cool. The reason I asked that is that when I talk about bro science, right, like the term, and I say it with some seriousness, in that to be scientific, to learn things like in an organized manner, it requires a philosophy of learning. If you're going to approach a subject of like, okay, I want to learn about X, how are you going to learn about it? And then like, what is sort of the viewpoint as to how you think, those pieces of information, like the whole collective picture, like how is that going to be, processed and analyzed? And there's I guess, I don't know, you'd call him a philosopher, but there's a very famous South African, John Smuts, hopefully I'm saying his name right. I think he was like actually the prime minister of South Africa at one time, before it was even South Africa. Oh, wow. But he wrote a book called Holism and Evolution. It's like, holism, like holistic thinking. And the book, it's a little bit wandering. Like you can kind of read through the first 30 pages, and it will probably, like, that by itself, it almost be, suffice, unless you want to read the whole thing. But he talks about the necessity of holistic thinking as applied to science, and how the compartmentalization of science that had happened even to that point. This was like the early 1900s, where you had people who were subject matter specialists, but they didn't know anything outside their field. And they weren't aware as to how their knowledge would integrate into a larger picture. And when I think of like a bro science perspective, taking it seriously, it's to view things like, I think potentially what you do, like take a systems-based perspective. You can't know everything about the system at all times everywhere, but you can identify the principles of how it interacts.
That's right.
And how it functions. And like, I'm very outcome oriented. Like, what's the outcome? Like, I always want to know what the outcomes are. I think, work backwards through there. Outcomes in the real world. So, but obviously you're a much more, probably logical, informational guy than myself. So you actually build a model, obviously, with your own GPT, Greg GPT.
Well, it's just like a custom GPT in Chat GPT that just has custom instructions. It's nothing, crazy.
Yeah.
But the holism, I like really resonate with that. One thing that I've noticed that is kind of a weakness in modern science is people stay so siloed. Just what that philosopher was saying, and it can be difficult to understand the system when you're just looking at a slice. So that's another thing that I try to do. I wouldn't consider myself an expert in any of those silos, but at least trying to connect the high level, how things work across them. And it also resonates with my personal philosophy, what I call structural coherence. And it's kind of, well, it's basically the more that you can know the truth. Let me back up. So we all kind of have our filters on how we see reality. And it's interesting. You can talk to two people who saw the same event, and you each come away with completely different versions of what happened. So you can infer from that our reality is not always the correct reality. And so to get to the correct reality is kind of an iterative process. And, how do you get to that iterative reality? But, I believe that the more that you can engage to try to find the truth, whatever that is, the more rich your life can become, and the more that you can engage in the world. And I believe that it's kind of through that engagement that we refer to as like happiness. So the process of understanding what is truth in the world and actively working toward that is what we perceive as happiness.
Yeah, that'll give you the more alignment in truth. The more you are in alignment with truth, the more satisfying your life should be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then also the more that you know about the world, the more you know about the world, the more deeply you can engage with that world. The more you know about your body, the better you can take care of it. The better you take care of it, the better you can present in the world. So, I do have this deep philosophy of really trying to engage. I think a lot of that came from reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance when I was
Great
19. Book. I love that book so much. But do you remember this part in there when he was talking about his friend, and his friend couldn't fix anything in the house? He couldn't fix his motorcycle, and he was like, when he looks at the motorcycle, all he sees is the motorcycle. He doesn't see these individual components that when you break them down and think about them logically, you can understand how they fit together. And so, he was kind of saying in a lot of ways that his friend was having trouble engaging deeply in life because he wasn't engaging more deeper in these systems.
I read that book years ago in, I think, like junior year of high school. I want to say.
What a great time to read it.
Yeah, it was like it was interesting because this it was not. It's impacted me like it was like multi-level, but it was probably like a catalyst for my like red pilling of reality, because I read that this was like 2006, 2007, and then right after I read it, the Great Recession happened. And so where I lived in California, very high foreclosure rate. Lots of people lost their homes. Like I in my particular like city area, I think it was really high, like 1 in 4 homes went under, foreclosed, bankrupt. Super common story. Everyone in high school knew someone who's like, oh yeah, my parents had to sell the house, or we had to sell the second house, or we had to move in with relatives. And then I started college at the same time. I was going to San Francisco State University. Again, Great Recession's happening, Occupy Wall Street. So like there's all these sociological, political things happening. And then I was very surprised that there were no adults that I knew who had predicted any of it.
Yeah.
Like that was what was very strange.
Wasn't that wild?
Yes. And like that was the strangest thing to me, of like, okay, this huge, upheaval happened. Like my parents, they had to sell their house because of, their mortgage at the time. But I couldn't get an explanation from anyone that I knew as to like, well, how come no one foresaw this? Like, were there signs? Like, how is the system even organized in this way for this to happen? And you're sort of in that place of, you realize how much you don't know. And you're thankful that you know that you don't know things, but you also realize like, wow, the extent of my ignorance is just massive. It's seemingly infinite. Right. Like I have a lot to figure out about how life works. But that book, like that was sort of like the trigger for that, since like the point that you just made of being able to view things and break them down into their constituent parts. Then from those pieces, you can then sort of construct the relationships that make that thing run. And then I was, very, slowly, poorly trying to attempt to do that with like, how does the economy actually work? Like, how does buying a house, then you take out a home equity loan, but then you can't predict like fluctuations in the market. Like how do I organize all this? And it took years to get through, but had I not read that, I'm sure I probably would have struggled for longer, than I needed to. And it still took a long time to sort of get to a point of, I'd say, sort of economic security of feeling that I have a fairly accurate reality picture, that the decisions I make for my own, financial prosperity are useful ones, with the outcomes that I want. That still took about a decade, but yeah, that book was always interesting to me, since I would sort of mentally reference back to it, of like, okay, I'm trying to, reading about whatever, like the Tort Act, the TART Act, that when there's a legislative act that sort of took away like all like sort of the bad loans. Like I remember the Obama administration, it was something like $700 billion. We're going to take all these things off the balance sheet.
Yeah,
like
the TARP.
Yeah, tarmac. I'm like, how does that work? How do you get $700 billion out of thin air and then you just like make debt go away? I'm like, all right, let's kind of break this down. Like, it was just like this very weird time to be 18, 19. But yeah, Zen art and motorcycle maintenance. Like, thank you.
That's so amazing.
You were helpful.
It sounds like it had almost an identical effect on you.
Yeah, it was. I'm the author. Like, I don't think he ever expected it to be interpreted that way. Maybe he did. Like, you never know how your work is going to make an impact on people. But yeah, that was an interesting time in life. So, yeah, going back to, I guess, the science portion of it. So, I mean, a question for you, since you have a framework for obviously like making sense of data and research, and sort of scientific study. What is your perspective on the datafication of health now? Because obviously we have lots of devices, we have lots of ways to, maybe have biomarkers. We can do blood work, we can do heavy metal testing. We can do Dutch testing. We can analyze urine. How does someone organize all of that and not go crazy from it?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a hard one. That is a really hard one.
Take your time.
You have so much data, and you're just like, where do I start? And especially a lot of times, it's kind of funny because we're more advanced than we've ever been, but at the same time, things are just like still really primitive in a lot of ways. But I think if you kind of understand, what are the things that are going to be, what are the big levers that are going to be driving health? I think for a lot of people, that's weight loss, it's fat loss. If they get their blood work done, they lose weight, they lose fat, they lose visceral fat, they lose liver fat. They're going to see markers improve, like insulin sensitivity, fasting glucose. So I think it's kind of trying to get an idea of like where you're starting, and then what are going to be the biggest levers that you can pull based on your starting point. And then what are the markers that align with that? And what does good look like? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 50 pounds to lose. You have a fasting glucose that looks good, but your fasting insulin is like 18. Maybe that's starting to get pretty out of range. You might go see a doctor. They might call it prediabetes. But really what's likely going on there is hepatic insulin resistance, and just needing to lose liver fat. So obviously those will be different for everyone. It's not going to be the same for everyone, but I think just trying to figure out those big levers and then just focusing on a few of them. So in the case of a person who might have 50 pounds to lose, their fasting insulin is a little high, then that might look like, okay, I'm going to start walking or exercising. I'm going to try to lose weight. I'm going to try to lose this liver fat, and I'm really going to watch that fasting insulin. That is probably, in a lot of ways, you could think of that as kind of the headline metric, because if you improve insulin sensitivity, you're going to improve a lot of things in your body. So I think not looking at all of these signals, just trying to find a couple that you want to focus on, and then designing the interventions to really drive those.
Gotcha. I mean, so let me think of how to phrase this. Do you have let's say like sort of a fundamental theory as to like how an organism operates, like what the point of it is? So to give context, like the way I oftentimes will describe it to people, like when we're talking about, let's say we're having a consult, it's like, okay, we want to get healthier. And I'll describe it within the frame that your body fundamentally is an organization, a system of energy. Like this, this is speaking simply, like your body is an organized system of energy. The more efficient that system is at energy going through the system, like the healthier you're going to be. You could view exercise as being able to put forth high amounts of energy. You can measure kilowatts or muscle force, like various things. But like if you can exercise, you can run really far or lift weights or sprint hard. Like your body can use energy efficiently. You can expel energy. You can metabolize it. Like that's the state we want to be in. And then someone who's overweight, obese, like they have metabolic syndrome, their body is inefficient at using energy. Like I think that framing is simple enough. Like okay,
I love that framing, because if your energy systems are good, if you can select the appropriate fuel for the context and utilize that fuel well, chances are like all of your other biomarkers are probably going to look pretty good, except for the genetic stuff that you can't control. But yeah, that is a great framing. And I love that framing because a lot of times, when people get overweight or they haven't been working out, they may not be able to use certain fuel sources. They may not be good at like oxidizing fat, as an example, and maybe kind of like stuck in glycolysis. So yeah, that is a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I got that from if you like cursory read of like ancient Greek philosophy, Aristotle, like the concept of vitalism.
Oh,
So like, so many like thousands of years ago, where you have, let's say, like old Greek guys, and they're trying to figure out like they're having these oral arguments, right? They're trying to study things just by cutting them open or looking at them, like what makes something alive, which is a good question, right? Like what does make something alive? Like how do you even define that? But there was this idea of vital energy of like, okay, like a living thing, like a flower or a human or an animal, like it's somehow filled with this metaphysical interaction where it's more than just the parts. It's living and it's breathing and it's going about and doing these motions and these functions, and it has this life cycle. And vitalism, later on, it was like not taken seriously in science. Like things got very compartmentalized, materialized, like where because it requires sort of like what's like a teleological view. If you're going to say that something's alive and vital, like does it have purpose? That's a big argument that happens in science. Are things just random, or do they actually have purpose? Like, and then that's its own philosophical discussion. But that vitalism concept always stuck with me, because when you're trying to describe to someone like what makes somebody healthy, like it's a good question. Like what does make someone healthy? How do you even go about? Again, you have to give that some kind of definition. And the energy definition, I think, works well, certainly in the context of exercise and like nutrition intervention, because you can very easily describe somebody like, look, the way your body is using food, which is energy, it's not efficient. The way your body is insufficient in these nutrients or in these micronutrients, your body's inefficient at movement. So if we can, when we're trying to fix all these things, what we're trying to fix, we're just trying to make you a more efficient living system, and you'll feel better, you'll perform better. And there's lots of ways to go about measuring that, but the core is always on that vital efficiency.
Yeah, I love that. If you think about like most diseases being downstream of metabolic health, well, what is metabolic health doing? It's just, it's all energy utilization. And so, yeah, I think that there's an amazing argument for that. I also think that there's like kind of one other aspect to it too.
Yeah.
If you think about like a car, an energy system, you kind of have that, the inputs, gasoline, the combustion, but also the exhaust. And so I think that's an important part of it too, is like flux. So not only are you generating energy, but are you kind of cleaning up after yourself? And so you could think of like flux in terms of glucose. You eat something, you have a big spike in glucose. Are you moving enough to clear it and get that translocated into the muscle? I think same thing for lipids too. If you eat a big meal, has some fat in it, you're going to create triglycerides, VLDL, and then I think those will ultimately get turned into LDL. They'll be in circulation, and are you clearing those effectively? So yeah, I think that's kind of like, in a lot of ways you can think of it as like the exhaust part of the energy system, where you have the the inputs, and the outputs would be the flux.
That's actually a good analogy. I know some people don't like the car analogy for the body. Like, an analogy is always, it's you're using a metaphor. It's not the actual system itself. But no one ever mentions the exhaust. Like, all right, you can put energy into the system, but how do you actually get rid of it, expel it, metabolize it? If you plug up a car exhaust, the car is going to explode. That's
right. I remember learning that in Beverly Hills Cop 2, I think it was, where he put the banana in the tailpipe.
Yeah. No, that's good. I've never heard anyone actually use that as a framing. That's really good. Yeah. So the question of LDL, like I've been going back and forth with this one myself for like a while. If you go back, a couple of years, 5-10 years, Well, you go back 30, 40 years, like LDL's bad. No LDL, get as low as possible. And then you sort of have like the paleo revolution and carnivore revolution. You have a bunch of people completely ignoring the LDL in some cases, where like just, it doesn't matter what the number is. What matters more is just like the triglyceride HDL ratio.
Yeah.
Which I think that does matter. But at the same time, like if you, I think, take like a more objective view of like the overall, like body of evidence of data of like, is having uncontrolled LDL a good thing? I'm like, I don't think so at all. Like, what's your sort of perspective on it now?
So I've thought about this a long time, because I grew up in an area where we thought all fat was bad in the 90s, and my dad being an N=1 experimenter with familial with FH basically. So he decided to run an experiment where I think he had a 0.5 gram of fat total for the month.
Wow.
And I mean, the guy was just eating junk. He was like eating like sugar wafers, like these, vegan hot dogs with like no fat in them. It was actually kind of hilarious. But at the end of it, what he noticed, he was so frustrated because like his eyes were jaundiced, his liver function was not very good, and his cholesterol actually gone up. And so he came away from this like, oh gosh, all cholesterol, it's worthless. I can't do anything. But I think over the years, what's really kind of changed my views is looking at the hunter-gatherers and the subsistence populations. And, in a lot of ways, you can kind of, circumvent some of the arguments on, exactly how things happen and things like that, and just look at their lifestyle and kind of infer from there, like, why don't they get it? So the Tismane are like one of my favorites. As a population, they tested, I think it was over 700 of them for CAC, and it's the lowest CAC ever recorded. I think even when they're like 50, like CAC is like 8 median or something like that. Wow. But then you can go over to like the Hadza or the Maasai, and you can kind of compare them, and neither of them get heart disease. So they don't have high rates of heart disease. And in the Maasai case, I think they are ingesting like 100 to 200 grams of saturated fat or something crazy. And so you look at the Maasai and you're like, is saturated fat good or bad? Well, I think it's kind of contextual, because I think they can get away with that because they're walking up to 16 miles per day. Back to this flux that we were talking about.
Yes.
So same thing with the Hadza, they're just getting so many steps in per day. And they've all done these double labeled water experiments, so they can, really accurately estimate their energy expenditure. And there's this really interesting pattern that I think is pretty fascinating. But when you look at their PAL, which is physical activity load, so that's their base metabolic rate, which would be, if you're laying in a hospital bed, how many calories are you going to burn? Divided by TDEE, so total daily energy expenditure. And once that's 2, it seems to be the case that most chronic diseases go away. Of course, this is correlation, but I do think there's causative elements of that. Then what you can do is you can take these same people, you can move them to the city, and their PAL goes down to 1.6. A lot of them had, a lot of people don't know this, but some of the hunter-gatherers actually have insulin resistance. It's hepatic though. And so they can still clear glucose through muscle. But you move them to the city and that hepatic goes full axis. And so their activity level goes down, their cholesterol goes up, and rates of disease start going up. So I think that low level movement of flux has a lot to do with it. It also helps with endothelial health. But I think probably one of the reasons why it's so confusing is, I'm sure you've probably seen this the study that showed like the relative risk of LDL versus insulin resistance. Like insulin resistance is like far and away the biggest risk factor for heart disease.
Yes.
And I think that you can believe that and also still believe that the cause will be ApoB retention. And, that probably just makes it easier to retain. Or, blood pressure, same thing, like kind of compromising the endothelia. So I think it's, I really do think trying to get ApoB down is really important. And trying to get as much of it out through movement as you possibly can, kind of throughout the day, is really important.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've been thinking about this since, depending on I'll reference somebody. There's a chiropractor I follow named Stefan Hussey. I'm gonna say Hussey. He's on Instagram. He wrote a book about the heart. He actually had a heart attack in his 30s that he survived and made a full recovery from. And his view of heart disease is that it's endothelial inflammation, not because of LDL specifically. It's like, the high cholesterol is more of a proxy, a symptom of, a greater disorder, inflammation in the system. In his case, he healed his heart. Legit, I mean, he medically documented all of it. So it's not just this isn't like a made up forum story. Like he documented his whole experience from being hospitalized to getting like the angiograms later on, scans, everything, where he views heart disease as it's an inflammatory situation. So the cholesterol itself doesn't matter that much. If you can lower it, but even there's this false attribution that takes place that the things you're doing to lower the cholesterol, like, okay, I'm going to walk a lot. Again, it's not the cholesterol that's the issue. It's the lack of activity of where just you have low flux. If you have high activity levels, you have overall less inflammation. Your body is actually maintaining itself better. Your vascular health is better. That's why you're cardiovascularly fitter. It's not because you try to lower the number per se.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting. You look at a lot of these subsistence populations, and if you were to kind of look at their blood work, a lot of their LDLs, it's all under 100, but it's not the like baby infant numbers that a lot of people are seeking today. Like sub 50 or sub 70,
30.
Yeah. So I think that what we kind of infer from looking at those populations, if you're moving a lot, you can probably withstand like higher LDLs. And that, you're probably right. A lot of that probably comes down to endothelial health. When you're moving, that's going to upregulate nitrous oxide. It's going to start vascular remodeling. So just by moving a lot, you're going to avoid arterial stiffness and a lot of the things that will probably contribute to. They'll be contributors for sure.
Yeah. Then, like in his case, he also mentions like he gets very into circadian rhythm, like heliotherapy, red light therapy, EMF, grounding. Like he's very big on. But the vascular remodeling, like I've read various cases of sometimes you'll have weird situations of someone that is, let's say, like a triathlete or a runner, and they still have really bad, let's say, like CAC score. Despite all the activity, it's like, okay, well, okay, so the exercise itself is not entirely protective. It's like, well, why is that happening? But then it gets into like more of like, okay, is it a clotting disorder? Is it something more genetic where maybe your body's just more prone to this building up calcification, like overreacting to maybe like arterial injury? Like, I don't know, right? Like this is all hypothetical.
The athlete CAC is a really interesting one, because they can have like CACs of 400 or higher, kind of depending on their age, but their events are lower. They have like lower events, and it appears to be like a different kind of CAC. So it's kind of, you could think of it almost like a smooth sheet on the endothelia of calcium. And it's kind of thought to occur from like kind of micro injuries, just system stress, basically.
Yeah.
And then it goes into repair it. But there are now ways. I just got a paper from this really prominent lipidologist in South America, really great guy, but you can actually distinguish between those two CACs now.
Oh, wow.
This is a paper that was written earlier this year in March.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see. I think that's going to be great for athletes because, they're going to, if they get a CAC back of like 400, they start freaking out. And then if you can then distinguish like, oh no, like 90% of that is actually protective. This is the kind of CAC that's not going to harm you. That'd be a great thing.
That's really interesting. Like my grandmother passed away, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, she passed away 2 years ago. And she was in her, I think she was in her early 80s. She had like a very rare form of pancreatic cancer, which might be genetic in my mom's side of the family, potentially. But yeah, so I mean, so it was the cancer that killed her. But right, I saw there was, I don't know, it wasn't a full autopsy report, but there was some post-mortem report that was prepared, and her CAC score was like 350. It was high, right? I'm like, oh wow. And it was surprising to me because I was looking at it, and she never had a heart attack. She had zero, it was just unexpected. She had zero signs of you'd ever think of any cardiovascular issues. She walked every day of her life. Yeah, even up until the final 3 or 4 months when she was bedridden, she was always walking. She was very physically active. She was always grounding a lot because she gardened barefoot for decades. She'd be like this, standing in the dirt for hours and hours.
Gardening's got to be one of the best things, I think.
No, it really made me think about that. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I was trying to make sense of it. I'm like, I was like, how is it so high? Since you hear about the CAC score, it's like, that's a really important thing. Like it should be 0. Like if it's hot, it's that a lot of the carnivore guys would be like, look, my heart's fine. I'm like, yeah, maybe that's true. Hers is 300 plus. I'm like, her blood pressure was like 110/70. Resting pulse rate was 50. Like this.
Wow.
Again, all the external cardiovascular stuff are the main things you can measure. All of it perfectly healthy, normal range. Never had any issues with clotting. It's just nothing. But the CAC was high. So I was always I'm still trying to make sense of that. I'm like, how is that even possible? But then it kind of reframes it for me of what is the CAC actually measuring? Are there differences in how that could be happening? So I mean, to you're sharing about the paper, I'd be very curious to see when that gets investigated further, what the implications are.
Yeah. Maybe you should have mostly protective CAC.
It may be.
So, that is really interesting. It's also interesting to think about. I'm not sure if you saw her lipid metrics, but there are certain genes. If you think of that system kind of like a sink with a faucet, kind of on the production side, and like a foot pump drain on the sink. I think that's kind of a relatively good mental model. But you can have all sorts of clearance issues that prevent things from clearing. If you look at the Amish, really, really interesting. It's almost like a perfect natural experiment because they walk 18,000 steps per day. They have almost no heart disease. But I think it's 8% of their population has this clearance issue called R3500Q. So it's a genetic polymorphism. And for those people, even if they are walking 18,000 steps per day, they're going to have 3 times the risk of heart disease. And it's just basically because the drain is kind of clogged. So and you can have genetic issues on the faucet side. You can have genetic issues on the drain side. So yeah, I think, but we see it in these populations where you can see the effect of people without that, and then people with these genes. And it's possible maybe she had one of those genes where she just had some clearance issues, and it just wasn't able to be cleared through exercise.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the genetic component of it, myself, my entire career, genetics are real, obviously. When you work with people, especially with training, building muscle strength, it becomes immediately obvious to you. But genetic testing itself, that's not something that I've personally, dived into much recently. I literally just past week ordered a couple of genetic tests to come that test various fitness genes. There was a mitochondrial test that just came on the market called MeetOme, which a good friend of mine, Chris Masterjohn.
Oh yeah,
call him. Yeah, he just made a company. Yeah, he just made a company, and it measures the efficiency of your 4 mitochondrial complexes. So it's literally sitting on my desk right now. I'm gonna do the swab and send it back. It takes 4 or 6 weeks to get the results. But really, I think for customizing one's own healthcare, being your own doctor, I'm that's that's sort of like the next frontier of it, since the general stuff I think at this point is fairly mostly figured out. Like we exercise, don't be overweight, don't be fat, right? Like A1C, like those things we know they're important. Sleep, like it's the basics, the fundamentals they're unchanged for all eternity.
Yeah.
But then getting to specifics, I'm like, then okay, now you're getting to level like your own DNA and how your body handles stress and handles nutrients and processes byproducts and substrates, and like that you have to deep dive on.
Oh yeah, you do. It can get complicated fast. I mean, even just with a couple different genes, there are a whole bunch of methylation genes, which determine how you methylate things, which are pretty common. Genes for basically everything. And I think that as soon as you kind of master those fundamentals, at some point you're going to get to the point where you're looking at your labs and you're like, okay, there's something genetic there that needs to be investigated. That's happened to me a lot.
What are some examples?
So I have a vitamin D receptor gene. So, which when you think of it is not really a good thing to have when you live in Seattle.
No.
So I need, it's like probably living in the worst place I could with that gene. But so you have to take more vitamin D basically, because you're just not synthesizing it as well. Another example was MTRR. So I have that, which is a methylation polymorphism that impacts your ability to like recycle vitamin B12. And then folate in there. So I have a few of those genes that can be kind of tricky to work through.
Yes, I mean your supplement stack is, I assume, pretty customized at this point.
Yeah. It's mostly customized around the genetic stuff. Kind of in this day and age, that's pretty much the only supplements I'm taking is if it's going to, overcome some genetic defect.
That's a good way of looking at it, since people can get super supplement happy, obviously. I mean, as you've seen, like you'd be taking 20, 30, 40 plus things a day, but then like how much of it is actually really making an impact?
Yeah.
Physiologically to like make things run optimal.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time, I think, kind of on this supplement kick. And then after a while, I just realized this is way too complicated. I'm just going to try to get most of my nutrients through food. I'll test, see how that goes, really tune my diet. And then I'll just save like a few supplements for the stuff that, I absolutely have to have.
Yeah, well, as you said, everybody goes through that phase where you have a whole cabinet full of whatever, 20, 30, 40 bottles.
Yeah.
It becomes excessive. Like the vitamins become a sort of meal in themselves. And then you're trying to compare that to your baseline of like, do I actually feel different? And then if you're getting blood work done, like, is it actually showing up in my numbers in any meaningful way? Well, maybe it's not.
Yeah, if you're taking like 10 or more, it can be really difficult to figure out which one's doing the work.
Well, you have like the multivariable interference effect, right? Like it's impossible to isolate anything if you're on a dozen different compounds.
Yeah. Unless you A/B test, obsessively like Brian Johnson did, it'd be very, very difficult.
Yeah, or you can do that. On the subject of Brian, what has been your take on his various experiments over the past few years?
I think they're really interesting. I love people who do N=1s and just see how they turn out. So, and then you can kind of see how they work, why it worked. So it's been fun, like going through his supplement stack and seeing, what works and why. Going through his diet to see, hey, are there any things missing, and are those filled by his supplement stack? So, he's got a pretty good system, but it's just fun to watch him, experiment. He's a pretty funny guy. I like that he doesn't take himself, too seriously. What was that one meme when he came out in like the nightgown and the candlestick and
moon bra
cap?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so funny.
Yeah, I met him.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I met him last year in Dubai at like a health summit that NOS put together. He was a very genuine guy. ideology and trying not to die aside, like he talked to everybody that talked to him, just super, it's honestly just like a sweet individual. And then, as soon as it was like 9:30, he's like, all right, I gotta go to bed. Like, I'm out. Then departed.
That's another thing to admire is just his discipline. He's so disciplined. And I think everyone that I know who's met him has said the same thing. It's like, wow, he's like they say two things actually. Wow, he's so nice. And then the second thing is like, and his skin is amazing.
He's very pale. Like, you can tell his skin looks very soft. Like, just like he doesn't tan, right? He's not.
Yeah.
He's not trying to get any melanin production going.
No.
So, like, it's interesting to me since like maybe he does live longer, but then there's that whole, I guess you'd say like the PD sphere of people where, so he has a very low core body temp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like his core body temperature is like 94, 95.
95.
Yeah, it's
right? So
like
crazy.
Hypothermic. Yeah. And their argument is that he's actually like lowering his sort of like vital energy over time. And that's why his body temp is so low. And that's not gonna, that's gonna like potentially lead to like, an earlier death. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe that actually does preserve you out for longer. Like, I don't know. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. I've spent so much time rabbit holing on this exact topic, and I could not find any answers in the literature.
Yeah.
Like human. And it's crazy. You see like a couple case studies of people with temperatures that low, but not many. And then if you look at there's this big group of people that they studied for CRON, which is that calorie restriction, optimal nutrition. So the idea is that you kind of bring the calories that you're eating down, and that will kind of slow your metabolism. You have it just goes a little bit slower, and from there you kind of your core body temperature comes down. But in this group, what was really interesting is like it only went down to 97. So, and it wasn't that big of a standard deviation. So, yeah, really interesting that he's down at 95. Not sure how he's doing that.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember reading something years ago. I think maybe Dennis Mangan shared it. Like, I don't know how accurate it was, but it was something to the effect of like all mammals have only a certain number of heartbeats, like over the course of their lifetime that you could calculate.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like part of living longer, if you slow your heart rate down, you have a low resting heart rate, then like you'll live longer because eventually when you reach your maximal extent of your beats, like you'll be 100 versus let's say 75, someone with a faster heart rate. Now, is that actually true? Like the premise of it itself is like maybe not. Like that'd be how would you study that? You'd have to, I guess, get a group of people together over the course of advanced age, probably from 50 onwards for 30 plus years, measure all their average heart rates, and then like to see who lived the longest. Right.
Yeah, that's always the challenge with anything longevity related is just the limits of being able to study it and how long it takes. So I guess what you can do is you can observe populations, which a lot of people do, and that's what they did with kind of the blue zones, which is a whole other topic. But yeah, it's just very hard to study. And as much as I would love that to be true for us to, like escape aging velocity in the next 10, 20 years, I do kind of have difficulty believing it. Just because I see so many gaps in the literature right now. Just in the stuff that I'm doing, like probably every day I'll run across a gap. And sometimes they're basic. Like I was talking with Dr. Tro, and he and I were having this debate on does saturated fat, kind of directly impact hepatic fat in an isocaloric state or in a deficit. And, we couldn't find any clear answers on that. So it can be like pretty basic stuff that is missing sometimes. And so I think it would be difficult to kind of figure out aging if there are all of these gaps in the literature. It's just going to take a lot of science to fill it and kind of put everything together. And then the other long pole is just testing. So even if you do, it's probably not going to be one big breakthrough just by virtue of how the body works. It's going to be like a ton of little ones. And how long is each one of those going to take to test in humans and validate. So I think it might happen someday, but I think we're probably a ways away. I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, we're probably a few decades away from that. I was I was like sort of rabbit holing a couple of months ago on the precursors of the Don't Die movement. So if you go back to the very early days of biohacking, like 1980s even, yes, at this point, like 40 years ago, and you can read statements from various sort of various scientists, like very grand proclamations that we're going to beat aging by the end of the century, and we're going to be living like 100 plus years, all of us. And like this is, let's say, like 1985, and none of that came true, obviously.
Yep.
And then you go back to yes,
90s and 2000s, and in a lot of ways, he was kind of like the Brian Johnson of his day.
Yeah, and I remember that documentary came out like, what, 2010, I want to say.
Was it Transcendent Man?
Yes.
Is that what it was? Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one. And that's how it can be. I think that's the thing about being a technologist is you can be right in terms of the future that you see and just wrong on timing. And that could be the case with both of them. Like premise correct, maybe timing is a little bit off, as it was for Kurzweil.
Yeah, that makes a good way of saying that. Like, I mean, it's also, that's a sort of a common refrain, even like in, well, like Silicon Valley, even like in venture, like the idea is good, the timing was wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's probably the case. They probably have the right idea. I think Brian Johnson will be right. Ultimately, I think he'll be right. And maybe we don't, eliminate death, but we might find ways to bring the average mortality, up a lot. Maybe living to 100 is like really common. So I think I could see that being pretty likely to happen. And maybe that's what would happen over the course of 20, 30 years is we get to like a much higher median lifespan. But, I think so much of that is going to be contingent, and until we can find a substitute for exercise and movement, which is funny because it's like most of the longevity drugs, they're doing AMPK,
exercise mimetics.
They call them exercise mimetics. So until we can really find a way around that, it's going to be, movement.
Yeah, I have a lot of guys experimenting like my biohacking group right now with the exercise mimetic peptides. So like small molecules like Sloop, cardarine, 5-amino-1-MQ, and they seem to work. Yeah, this in terms of this performance, where people will use them. Let's say they do it. Like I tell everybody, if you're going to use these, you got to do high intensity interval training, some HIIT. Like do something where you're really like maxing out your mitochondria. Like you're topping out ATP production. And people will use them and they will notice a difference. Like, I actually was able to go like, 5% harder. My kilowatts on the bike were higher. Like this is doing something. I'm like, that's awesome. Great. But then if you're not exercising, just waste of money. Just,
right.
and maybe if they were to do blood work before and after, which I try to have everybody always do in labs, but if you're not exercising, I don't think they have any effect. It's sort of like taking caffeine and then like sitting on the couch.
Right.
Your heart rate will probably go up and that's it. It doesn't do anything for you.
Yep. But gosh, 5%. I mean, that's a pretty big bump if you're talking compounded over a year. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, these are like mildly to moderately trained people. I'm sure in an athlete, like you're not going to get 5%, every quarter. But I mean, I can see why some of them are banned. Obviously, I'm like, like even a 1 or 2% difference in top end performance in a lot of races and a lot of sports. That's the difference between first and 10th.
Yeah,
in some cases. But yeah, they do work. But the question, I just on the subject of living forever or living longer, do you actually want to live longer? Like, because I think about this a lot, where this whole question now is in the zeitgeist, like the gestalt of like, imagine living forever, or we're going to be death, or we're going to extend longevity. We're going to live, we're going to go make to 100. What for?
Yeah, that's what I come down to. There's this like old Woody Allen quote. It's like people want to live forever, but they don't know what to do with a Sunday afternoon. So I think, so long as I have purpose, I'll want to be around. I think for me, that means being around for my daughter, obviously as long as I possibly can. And then, I'm really interested in reverse engineering chronic disease, like looking at these subsistence populations and really trying to reverse engineer, like, why do they not get the diseases that we get? And so that's been taking kind of most of my time. So yeah, I think I want to live a long time, as long as I can, as long as I'm healthy. I mean, gosh, I think living a long time with, pretty low quality of life doesn't seem like fun at all.
No, I mean, I'm sure you've had experiences as well of seeing, let's say, older relatives, like they're in the last decade of your life. It's mostly miserable. Like medical science is able to keep them alive, like on a crawl. But once you, like, movement's always like, that's probably like the biggest lever. Once you lose the freedom to move, where you go from being walking to being unstable to then needing assistance or a wheelchair, or you're bedridden, you just sort of this, like, you're halfway between the threshold of life and death. You just become that walking corpse, and then you have the bodily pains and everything else. And like, I don't like, what's the point of that? Versus a more dignified death of, hopefully going when you're maybe not in your prime, but you still have your faculties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and some of these diseases just seem like it'd be awful. Like getting Alzheimer's, or something like that. That'd be so hard on your family, when you don't remember them and they're taking care of you. So I don't think I'd want to go out that way. That's for sure. Yeah, back to the movement. It's pretty interesting if you look at, like, the studies of people who, like, fracture a hip. Like 50% die within like 2.5 years. So you just lose mobility, and things start going south really quickly.
Yeah, the muscle argument. Yeah, I've seen various factions, like some like the Ray Cruz, or Jack Cruz people, I guess, are like, I don't say anti-muscle, but like, it's not, muscle is not so important as you age. I've seen like some of them make this argument, which I always find a bit preposterous. And so you look at aging people, you look at people, let's say, who are in their 90s and they're still mobile and fit and healthy. Let's, like, they're old at that point. You're in your 90s, like you beat most people. They can still walk around.
Yeah.
And now maybe they weren't bodybuilders. Maybe they didn't have the big muscle reserve that we talk about. Like, maybe that concept is, has utility or doesn't have utility, but they're still able to walk around. They still have enough lean body mass to obviously, get up, use their legs, and not losing their balance. And like, that's absolutely essential. So you have to do something to maintain that, which, it starts obviously when you're younger.
Yep. Yeah. All you have to do to see if muscle is important, go spend an hour in the nursing home during lunchtime, eat lunch with them, and then just observe people get up out of their chair. And then you'll be convinced.
If they can.
Yeah. And you'll see, like, some people pop right up and they're walking back to their room, or they're kind of like assisted living. But there are a lot of people who just are going to need assistance or try to get up. And obviously muscle may not be the only thing, but it's going to help a lot. And, to your point about reserve, I do think that's important, because if you have any sort of unexpected hospitalization or anything like that, you could easily lose 20 to 30% of your muscle, depending on how long you're in there. And is that going to put you below a threshold where you can't be independent? So I think that's a really important thing too to think about, is not just, hey, I'm strong enough right now, but thinking about having a little bit more reserve so that if, accident happens, you're still going to be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I tell everybody that now that I've client otherwise, that if you can peak out your lean body mass in your probably like your 40s, I'd say, like, you can build muscle for quite a long time before you hit your natural limit. If you can top that out in your 40s, like, you're going to age well, because you're going to obviously, like, you'll hit 60. Probably the 70s is when people really see a decline in function. You can actually meet some very fit 6-year-olds.
Yes.
You don't meet, like, well, maybe there's exceptions, but like, the likelihood of meeting a really buff 78-year-old's
pretty low. Increasingly rare. Yeah. Very, very rare.
So get as strong as you can while you can. On the subject of training, how do you structure, this is like a bro question. How do you structure your training workouts now, exercise? What does that look like for you?
So I basically do a 5-day split. And so it's shoulders, back, legs, arms, accessory. And then I try to walk between 15 and 17,000 steps per day. And on occasion, I'll do a rehit. But what I've found is that it seems to add a lot of fatigue and kind of take away from my lifting. So I just try to get as much movement as I can, steps and lifting. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so
I have a carol bike in my room. Sometimes I'll do like, zone 2 for an hour a few times a week. But just try to keep it really simple. So it's just easy to stick to.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically like lift and walk a lot.
Lift and walk. Gosh, if you lift and walk a lot, you're going to go pretty far.
So the 5-day week split, that's like it's a sort of like a classical bro split.
Yeah.
Essentially like 1 day a week.
Classical bro split.
Frequency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How'd you arrive at that? Was that just sort of figuring out your recovery in terms of this, how joints, muscles felt, and then sequencing it out that way?
Well, I was doing a lot of experimentation on my own, and then finally decided to get a coach. And so Antidoc put it together for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. It's been great for me. And I've done a lot of like modification. Like what day do I put leg day on? To make sure that I can put everything into that. So I've kind of tweaked it from there, just based on how I'm feeling. And then also the timing, I think, is so important that I've learned. Like I seem to do better kind of in the afternoons for upper body, but in the morning, like I really need to do legs in the morning.
Yeah.
If I wait too long, I'm just not going to be able to put my all into it.
Interesting. Yeah, the once a week schedule that gets critiqued sometimes, but I've always found that to work extremely well. I've written about this, I think, in like the PPL sort of program, like treatise I wrote, where if you want to absolutely guarantee recovery session to session, just do 1x frequency.
Yeah.
Now you can argue like, well, is it optimal? Like, what if there's what if your gains recede? And like, I don't take that seriously since I've done it with so many people. I'm like, you train a muscle group, a couple muscle groups once a week. You can go as hard as you want. Like legs, for example. Like you put all your muscle energy into it, and you won't train again until 6-7 days later, and your recovery will be at its peak. Like you don't ever have to worry about managing. Like I'm still kind of tired from the last workout, or if even like the interference effect of, let's say you're trying to train legs twice a week, so you train them like Monday and then Thursday again. But like Thursday is not going to be as intense as Monday. I'm like just 1 day a week. Try it. It might work really well for you, especially past the age of 40.
It works great for me. And I kind of substitute higher volume. So I do think that allows you to do a little higher volume with that too.
Definitely.
So I really like it. I think it works great, but it's gonna be different for everyone. Probably why we argue about it incessantly for.
This is the same argument's been happening since 1920, basically. Like, how many days a week do you train? I train 3 days. How many days do you train? I train 5 days. 5 days? How do you do that?
Exactly. Well, I think Sarah, I can't remember. She does like legs, I think, like 3 or 4 times a week.
I don't know how chicks do that. I mean, like women, there's obviously differences in physiology between men and women, but like ever since glute training got really popular, right? Like 2010s, Brett Contreras, glute training took off. Every woman now wants a juicy butt.
Mm-hmm.
And you see these girls training legs, like basically just the whole week is training legs. It's like an upper body day and the rest is legs. But then they actually get really good results.
They get great results.
Which I don't think a man would get, honestly.
I don't know. I don't think I could do it.
No.
That's for sure. I mean, my legs seem to be like pretty shot after 1 day a week. It takes like multiple days to be back at 100%. So I don't know how they do it, but I know Sarah, I mean, it's not like she's going light either. It's not, she puts a lot of effort in.
Yeah.
And does like 3 days a week. So I find that very impressive. I wish I could do that, honestly.
Yeah, there's some difference in female physiology where obviously, like, being women, like, having, lack of testosterone, or well, not supposed to have testosterone, but they have a lot faster recovery from, like, certain volumes of training, compared to men. Certainly, so definitely aerobically as well. But then even having higher estrogen levels is beneficial for muscle recovery.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which I think that's where, like, the leg training thing, I'm like, I don't think, I've seen male bodybuilders, known a lot of them over the years, of, like, doubling up the frequency for legs. Like, guys can train legs about twice a week. I haven't really seen anyone successfly do it 3 times a week. It just hurts. Like, your performance just goes off a cliff. But then you have these girls that will do it, and then maybe they're doing moderate volume per workout, but they're taking sets to failure every time.
Yeah.
And they're doing, like, some kind of hip thrust every workout, and some kind of squat or lunge every workout, and, like a kickback every workout. And, like, the muscle growth is pretty impressive. Like, that was a big thing that changed, like, the past 2 years. It used to be thought that women had half the muscle growth of men. So if you go back 20 years in literature, it's like, oh, if you're a woman and you train, your gains will always be half of that as a guy. It's 50% slower. That was actually completely untrue.
It's the same, right?
It's the exact same.
Yeah.
Like, a woman gains muscle at the exact same rate as a man. The difference is just overall, obviously, smaller body size, just starting point wise.
Lower ceiling.
Smaller skeleton, like, the ceiling's obviously a bit lower, but the actual rate of gain, no difference.
That's so cool. Yeah. Yeah. I think that could, like, really inform, like, how women train too. I think they're all, really afraid. Some are very afraid of, like, getting too big and looking too muscular. So I think that, I wish that more of them would understand that, they're not going to turn into, like, a male bodybuilder. But they're just going to, like, look really good.
You look really hot.
Really lean and muscular arms, and it's not something to worry about, like, getting too muscular, I think, as a woman.
No, I've only known, like, 2 or 3 women in my lifetime that, like, legitimately had what I consider, like, male muscle building genetics, where, like, their upper body would get, like, they got bigger beyond what they want to look like. But it's a very, very rare problem.
It's very, very rare. Yeah. I know 2 women like that. One doesn't work out at all, and she has, like, a 6-pack and just, like, totally ripped. She looks like if she spent, like, 2 or 3 months training, she could, like, step on stage and, like, win a bikini contest. And yeah, she just doesn't train at all. It's just, I think a lot genetic. And then another one who is just, like, really, really muscular, like, former pro athlete. But she works out, like, really hard. But yeah, just has this incredible physique.
Yeah, that's maybe the future will be we don't need to train at all. There's a friend of mine was actually looking to, like, full statin therapy recently. I guess, like, a newer version of it that supposedly delivers, like, system-wide muscle building effects. But I've seen about that. We were talking earlier about, like, the genetic component of aging, where, if we, all these things that we get done now to try to improve health and extend lifespan. I guess if we really were to live longer, we probably wouldn't have to do any of them.
Probably,
if we were to reprogram ourselves genetically, where our mitochondria and everything in our body just operates at absolute peak efficiency, number one, you'd be like with the guys who are, like, the freaks, right? They can get away with doing everything wrong, but they still look great.
Yeah. I think we'll probably get to that point. I think it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, maybe. There was a researcher last year at the Dubai conference where he was showing a graph of lifespan and, like, talking about anti-aging interventions and longevity. And interesting guy. He was actually a physicist, but the graph he pulled up showed, like, the average human lifespan, and it basically tops out around 100 years. He's like the maximum human lifespan. I'm sorry. He's like, the maximum lifespan is about 100 years, barring, like, those very few outliers. He's like, so the average has increased over time. The maximum has not. He's like, it just goes to 0. You get to 100, like, that's it. You're done.
Yep.
He's like, so everything you guys are doing here at this conference is all a waste of time. It's all bullshit. He's like, you're not going to live forever. You trying to optimize your diet means nothing. It's like, so it's like, oh, like, so everyone was watching the audience, like, oh, okay, this is kind of like a, like a splash of cold water. Like, well, what's he getting at? He's like, so if you want to live forever, like, that was his whole thing. We need to rewrite our DNA. So he has, like, a DNA lab, I guess, that he runs. He's like, we need to rewrite our DNA and our entire genome to optimize it for like infinite life. So he's like, then it got like really like sort of like futuristic. So if we do this, and this, take out like, rethink of how the concept itself of cell aging and apoptosis, we're going to get rid of all of that. We're going to have infinite cells. It's like, well, I mean, that's more impractical than like trying to optimize your sleep at this point, right? It was all theoretical. But I'm like, it was an interesting point where he's like, I was thinking about, I'm like, yeah, he's correct. I'm like, if you actually were to, lift 120 or lift 150, you'd have to have such a robust body and genes and everything that you don't need to live optimally. You can just, what we're going to call it, you can live moderately, you can live messy, you can live chaotic, but your body would just be able to handle the stress and the inefficiencies.
Yeah, that'd be very, very cool if we can get there.
Yeah. Big if, but
yeah, big if. I think we will. I think it's just a matter of time. And then I think that just, what we get first and what that timeline is will kind of dictate that. Back to the muscle building. This is just like, do you know this account? I think it's Cremu is the name.
Yeah. I'm actually friends with the guy in real life. I won't say who he is. He's not.
Oh, that's cool.
But I know.
I love his account.
Yeah, he's great.
His account's amazing. But he was posting that one of his friends was working on this new muscle building compound. Of course, this is hearsay, but it's Cremu. I trust him.
Yeah.
So he injected this new compound in one leg only, and that leg got 3 inches bigger. 3 inches. So, yeah, maybe we're closer than we think.
Yeah, no, I know the exact post you're talking about. Like, that was really fascinating. The thing that was interesting to me, though, of like, like with those injectable therapies, how do you? I mean, it's easy to think like it's very sort of like superhero-ish. Like it's like Bane venom. Like you're just gonna put the if you ever watch Batman, right? Like it's gonna go into your brain or your body, then your muscles just get bigger. I'm like, how do you keep it from, let's say, like hypertrophizing like cardiac muscle, right? Like you don't want your heart to go overgrown.
No.
Like there's that factor. And then two, like how do you actually apply it essentially like equally, where it's like, okay, we got our shoulders, our arms, our biceps or triceps or forearms or hand muscles, like everything actually gets covered in uniform fashion. Like how did that work mechanistically? I could see like a localized effect where you put it like into an area of tissue that's like your deltoid, but like, is that going to somehow filter down to like your entire arm, like the rest of you? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know either. Huh. Yeah, especially because it did seem to be localized with just that one leg. So,
right?
Yeah. Maybe, you have those Botox master injectors. Maybe one day we'll have like the equivalent role for like muscle.
Yeah, like a full body injection. Though, sort of be like I don't know, what do they even look like? Gotta be like that, like the Wolverine scene when he's getting the adamantium injection to his skeleton. You get like, if you remember that from the movie, it's a cool scene, right? It's like, I don't know, you could count them. There's like 100 injector points all at once, so all gets distributed evenly.
So cool.
Yeah, maybe.
Love
that. I have to go see my kids. Yeah, we're an hour and a half in.
Oh wow,
it was awesome talking to you, dude. There's a whole bunch of questions I ask you about different subjects, but we could be here for like quite a while. But what's some big stuff that you're working on right now that you want people to know about? Anything in the pipeline?
Let's see. In the pipeline, we've got Dark Lab. And so Dark Lab's gonna be my long form stuff. I'm still working on my first post. It's taken a lot longer than I thought. It's basically the first post will be on can we get people off of GLP-1s? Because if you look at the data, like 50% of people like gain their weight back. So I'm basically going through and just mapping the systems for why that could be, and then how you could address that. So that's basically my latest project is Dark Lab. I'm going to be doing a lot of long form. I was realizing that it was kind of like reaching the limit of threads in the amount of detail that I wanted to provide. So that's where I'll be writing about that.
Very cool. We didn't even talk about GLP-1s. Like, obviously, I mean, have you experimented with any yourself, or?
I did. I took some very low dose TERS. For a couple of weeks, and it was like crushing my appetite. I couldn't believe it, and it was like I think less than 1 milligram per week.
Oh wow.
So,
okay.
So I just stopped using it.
Yeah, no, I've been on like an experiment now, like full disclosure. So I've been using Retta since I think May. Yeah, end of May, basically. So I'm going to take it for like 6 months and just like, I have before and afters with blood work. I just want to see what changes. But I have a ton of people in my group that are using it, and also tears as well. But yeah, like the remission rate for it, where like half the people that use it do regain the weight back. I think what's missing from the process, like this is kind of like my working theory, is that if you use them, Retta especially, or tears, like they create this huge amount of what I call cognitive space, where you just don't think about food, right? You're not hungry at all. Cravings, addictive behavior just gets crushed.
Just crashes.
Where if you apply that to, and this sounds cliche, but like building not just healthier habits, but like you're building new neural pathways around behavior, around regulation. And then once you hit the target weight, you don't come off it. So if you did say it takes you like 5 months to hit target weight, stay on them another 5 months, titrate in reverse, or titrate back down very, very slowly. And then I think my working theory, and not that I'll never be able to publish this, but like it is working right now, is as you try to titrate back down slowly, there's no weight regain, because all the work that you did the first 5 months, now you've solidified it. All the neurons, let's say, like, because it is very normal sometimes for cravings to come back. Like it's like the appetite switches. Oh man, like I want food, massively. It's like get that mental loop to just like those neurons that fire together, let them die together. And maybe it takes like a year, but they will, right? Yeah. Like I think they will. And then like now that you're off, it took like a year to hit like 6 months to hit the target weight, 6 months of still being on, but then you eventually stop taking it. And now I think it would be permanent. So that's, I got a smaller group of people. That's how they used it. And like that's how they described it, of like, wow, that like this worked incredibly well. It's like, I remember being the old way, like the old identity of like, I used to be the person that would want to binge out. And like, I couldn't control that behavior. It's like, it's not there anymore. It's just sort of like a memory of it, like an echo. But they thought it was a very long-term approach, right? Which like I don't know how you do that experiment in medicine. Like, because obviously a lot of things went into it, but that's how I imagine it would be. I think that'd be the necessary approach to not have the remission, be 50%, where it'd be successful for 100% of the people using it. Which that's obviously that's not going to happen perfectly, but for anyone that's listening, of like you're using a GLP-1 right now, like, well, how do I eventually get off it? That's how I would suggest getting off it. Whatever amount of time you spent on it to reach target, same amount of time to titrate down. Double it, and then at that point, your new identity should be solidified.
That's awesome. That's so cool. That would actually work really well synergistically with my theory, I think, which was, we do create GLP-1 endogenously, but most of that's going to be signaled, in the colon, in the microbiome, through FFAR2 and FFAR3. Those are signaled from primarily propionate and butyrate, which you need not only fermentable, fiber and starch to create that butyrate and propionate, but you actually need to get it as far down into the colon as you can, like into the distal colon.
Oh, okay.
So that I think kind of helps solve the production side, because there's this one theory that I have is, could a portion of this, and maybe not all, because I do think behavioral is a big part of it, but could a portion just be GLP insufficiency? But then there's another side too. And there's a little bit of a clue here, because all of these GLP-1s and all the new generation ones, they're all modified. So they're modified so that DPPR can't break them down. Well, where do you get DPPR? Or sorry, DPP4, I meant. So when you become insulin resistant, that will also increase DPPR. And so you could have this situation where you have an insufficiency of GLP-1 from kind of lack of fermentable fiber. And then you have this upregulated DPP4 from insulin resistance. And so any GLP-1 that you create is like getting cleaved in minutes.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's one thing and that'll be like what the first post is on, where I kind of, show what I believe is evidence for that. But it gets really tricky because oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's just kind of, maybe this is clarifying for you. I mean, this is more your realm, obviously, than mine, with the biochemistry. But I had noticed this like months and months ago, where so a very common side effect of the GLP-1s, like tears, certainly semaglutide, like appetite, or not appetite, but like indigestion, right?
Yeah.
You'd hear this a lot. People like, oh my gut, like, or I got diarrhea. And so I got very specific. I think this is like in my Retta document that floats around. Like, you need to maximize your soluble and insoluble fiber intake. Like when you're using these, fiber helps digestion, right? Like, okay. And like, and this was not based upon like, your argument, obviously, like your premise is, detailed. Mine was just a lot simpler of like, well, your digestion's messed up. Like, I think a lot of you guys, like, it's clearly changing your gut biome. We need to, kind of do a gut biome reset. So like glutamine, digestive enzymes, but like, I want you to make sure you're getting in like at least like a solid, like sort of like a 1-to-1 split of soluble to insoluble fiber, and make that very regular. And that kind of fixed it for a lot of people. And then also it for the, the carbohydrate intake. This was another common problem, especially with like the Retta. People to get like kind of borderline hypoglycemic. Like they just be getting tired. I just don't have the energy. I'm like, okay, like you're going to need to still a calorie controlled diet. Like nothing actually changes with the diet per se in terms of calories, but increase your carbohydrate intake, keep your blood sugar elevated throughout the day because it has changed your insulin sensitivity, pretty dramatically. Combine that with regular fiber intake, the recommendation. And then you do that and like energy levels come back. So it's like, oh, I feel good again. Digestion, gets resolved. Like I'm digesting food well. Awesome. And then, when they eventually sort of titrate off it, it's just the overall sort of, appetite, digestive, regulation, energy levels, they stay even. You don't have like these weird fluctuations happening.
That's so cool. Yeah. I bet that's probably only helping the endogenous GLP-1.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Yeah. And if you're telling them, are you doing any psyllium husk in there?
Yeah.
By chance? Yeah, that's actually, so I think that's a really important one. You mix with kind of other fermentable fibers and starches because it becomes, like that gel and that viscous. So it can kind of help take the fermenters further down the colon.
Yeah.
So that one's particularly important. Like it has almost no fermentability itself. I mean, it's like really low, but it's like great as this like gelling carrier.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what, there was a book I read a couple of years back, like cells, gels, and something else. But basically talks about the importance of like gelatinous, like structured water, forms in the body, which I was like, oh, that's really interesting since it's so easy to do like the hand wavy explanation of like fiber is important. It's like, why? Like, what's it actually doing? It binds stuff together. How? And then like you dive a little bit into it. It's like, oh, okay, like you actually, like if you're going to actually dispel, byproducts of digestion and then have them in like in a structured form where you can, poop it out, right? Like it has a certain consistency to it. Like it's going to need some like gelatinous binding of like, oh, okay, so the psyllium husk, like that makes sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, fiber in the microbiome is like infinite rabbit hole.
Yeah, I went through a period like some years ago. I'm like, no fiber. Let's just see what happens. But then, like, I've always had like somewhat sensitive digestion, and like my mother's side, they tend to have like stomach issues. And then I started incorporating more fiber, and especially this past year, I was in South Korea, and the South Korean overall like generic diet, very high in soluble and insoluble fiber and prepared fiber, right? It's not raw vegetables. Like everything is stewed, or it's a broth, or it's pickled, or it's fermented. The meals just have like fantastic micronutrient density. And I was only there a few days, and like I just felt great, like eating the food. And ever since I got back, my wife now, like is every meal that I have, all of them, it's like, okay, protein source, obviously some fat, fiber source. It's a mix of fibers. And like my previously sensitive stomach, just non-issue.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it helps. I'll do the same thing. I'll like mix in either some psyllium husk or some it's called SCF, which is corn fiber, which is like my favorites, or like some of the fast fermenters, like inulin, just tiny amounts of that. But yeah, pectin's a great one too. But yeah, I love mixing them in with every meal. So you can kind of think of it as like building a fire. Our fermenters are going, but you kind of have to stoke that fire. We're going to have the kindling, which is going to be like the really fast fermenters, mostly fermenting in your like proximal colon. And then you've got like your RS2s, RS3s, like the resistant starch. Those are like putting big logs on the fire, where you're going to get like a lot of fuel, but you need to have the fire needs to be going pretty well to do that. Then you're going to basically, it's almost like pushing a fire down a pipe, and that's kind of how the psyllium husk works. Just pushing that fermentation farther and farther.
That's a really cool analogy. So for someone that, let's say, like they're listening, they have gut issues, right? They don't digest things well. Like, do you have a protocol of sorts for like introducing fiber into a diet? Like, how would you sequence that out?
So this is something I'm just getting into.
Yeah.
But who I think does is Ross. I think it's Ross Gut Health. He posts a lot about this.
Yeah.
And has all sorts of info. So he's probably the best person I could think of to get those specifics. But I think, like in general, go really slow.
Yeah.
Go really, really slow. Back off if you are experiencing gas or bloating. Just kind of titrate down, and then just and try to get some every meal. And just like you were recommending, I think that's the best approach. And trying to get at least some mix of the faster fermenters, I think is a good idea, but very, very low doses of them. You don't need too much of them.
No.
And then I think as much resistant starch as you can get, RS2 and RS3, once you have those fermenters like fired up. So that's like in green bananas, heated and cooled potatoes, heated and cooled rice. I think particularly basmati because it's high in amylase. So green plantains, things like that.
Okay, that's super useful. Since I think for a lot of people where they try to add in fiber, this is a very generic recommendation. Like I made this mistake years ago. You just like you'll do a couple things. Like you'll eat a ton of broccoli, like raw veggies, or you'll overdo it with like psyllium husk. I did that once. I can't even tell you how much I put in, like, I don't know, like 40, 50 grams into like a cup of water, like a shaker. Yeah. I'm like, it was just like a sludge. I'm like, oh, maybe this will be good. And like, it was not good.
Oh no, I can't imagine.
It was bad.
I bet that was bad.
Yeah. There's never any direction on it. It's just like it's just a generic fiber. It's like, well, what kind, how much are there differences? Okay. That's
I actually want to do a big post on that.
Yeah.
Because, we have this category, which is fiber, but there are a whole bunch of things that we lump into that bucket that are not fiber, but we just put them in fiber because they're not protein, fat, or carbohydrates. So this would be like, like FOS is an example. FOS is what it's called. That's a starch. So there's just so many starches that are bundled in with the fibers.
What constitutes like an actual fiber?
Well, I think the insoluble, soluble is the difference. Yeah, but it's basically from all of the solubles is kind of where you get the mix of like fibers and starches too. But it's really, I think, less. It is important to have some insoluble, but most people, when they think about fiber, they're just thinking about like, oh, the cardboard that you eat so you can poop better.
Yeah.
When really it's about how do you get those fermentable fibers so that you can get the short chain fatty acids to signal the things in your microbiome. Like AJAC is one, which would kind of controls how permeable your gut is, or how tight the junctions are. You have TREGs in there, which is like immune cells. It can modify insulin resistance. So if you are very low fiber, there can be things that are fermented in your gut because it's going to be mostly protein that will influence insulin resistance. Yeah, IMP is like one of them. So it's a form of propionate that's kind of associated with atherosclerosis and insulin resistance. So yeah, it's just, you don't even need fiber per se, but you need fiber to ferment to get the short chain fatty acids for the signaling. So that's the really important part.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's insightful. Like I have some carnivore friends where they've had no fiber for years, right? Like just none.
Yeah.
But they still have like indigestion issues, or they'll think they have like SIBO, or like something, like you're missing something in your biome clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like not just not getting fed, but like you've had an overproduction of something, from this straight, protein dominant diet and nothing else.
Yeah, we are meant to target between fiber and no fiber. And what I think this is actually an evolutionary adaptation to tell us when there's food availability and not food availability. So if you think about like the summer, tons of plants are growing, you move into the fall, you can just there is abundant food because there are plants all around. Those plants are going to have fiber. You're going to eat those. It's going to turn into short chain fatty acids. And if you just look at what happens when you have high fiber and low fiber, it's like, oh, okay, the body is preparing for summer here and then winter here for food shortages. So like all the adaptations that kind of take fiber out, what I believe is happening is like, hey, we're going to get ready for low food availability. And so we're going to ramp up immune systems. We don't have fiber. We still need propionate. So we're going to loosen the tight junctions so that we can take the mucin from the gut lining and ferment that into butyrate. We're gonna upregulate insulin resistance too, because we're not gonna have as much glucose available. So we should probably keep that around. Whereas you switch back and it's like, okay, we can take immunity down because we're probably not gonna have to eat a carcass with maggots in it. We're going to ramp down, we're going to make us more insulin sensitive, and we're going to pull those tight junctions together because we no longer need to take mucin from the gut lining. So I think we're meant to be in both states, but when you look at them, when you're in that proteolytic state where you're mostly fermenting protein and amino acids, you have kind of all these not so great outputs of like ammonia, p-crystol, IMP, all sorts of other things that can cause issues. Whereas, when you're higher fiber, you don't necessarily have those things. So yeah, I think we can toggle in between them. We're so resilient as species. I think we can actually live without fiber. You see this in carnivore community for a really long time. But I think the question is like, what is more optimal? And it's probably getting into a saccharolytic state where your pH is lower and you're fermenting a lot more fiber.
That's really fascinating. I'd read this years ago. Yeah, nothing to do with fiber, but the concept of seasonality with food supply, and that this is very so the bro model of like summer is cutting season, right? Like that's when you get cut. And then winter is bulking season. That's when you gain weight. But then you look at animal models, and then you look at actually like the newer data on humans where, okay, during the summer, like when you have peak solar exposure, it's summer, insulin sensitivity is at its highest. It actually does affect carbohydrate metabolism. You're really good nutrient partitioning. Like that'd be the best time to gain weight.
Yeah.
Because your metabolism is at its peak. And that's when most animals, obviously, at least the ones that live in, climates where there's a summer, winter, like that's when they fatten up. Summer to fall, and then winter comes and you lose weight. Like that's when you cut down, like you're living off kind of basically stored body fat. But fitness culture does the opposite. It's like summer you cut, winter you bulk, and maybe it doesn't matter. Like guys have been doing it for decades, right? Maybe it doesn't matter. But I started questioning the past couple of years. I'm like, is this actually like say circadian aligned, or is it just like one of those cultural practices where we do it because we do it, but it doesn't necessarily line up with biology the way we think it does?
Right. Yeah, it's a really fascinating way to think about it. Like, should you be doing it the opposite way? Maybe.
But obviously, no one wants to be fat during summer, though. Like,
exactly.
I want to be able to take my shirt off. Like, I get that. It's just, a
The
question.
dad bod.
Yeah. the I gave up body. So
Yeah. I loved how dad bod became a meme there. And it was like really muscular guys who were like at 14, 15% body fat.
well, I mean, I think the best one I saw, like, I don't know, this was on TikTok or somewhere, where younger crowd, but it was a guy going around showing pictures of Chris Bumstead to girls, like in the off season. And it's like, hey, what do you think of this guy? Is this a dad bod? Yeah, I guess that's a dad bod. Like, women don't know what they want. Like,
That's so funny.
If Chris Bumstead is dad bod, like, we're all fucked.
Yeah, we're all fucked. We have no hope.
But yeah, I mean, on that point, I mean, I don't think that the summer cut is going to change anytime soon. But I mean, if someone wants to run the experiment and gain weight during summer, maybe your winter shred down would be easier.
Yeah, it might be. I could see it happening.
Yeah. All right, my son's here looking at me through the door.
He's like, Dad. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was like, oh, let's wrap it up, Greg. 45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
All right. But okay, so you got the project going on. Obviously, you're on X. If people want to come, work with you, consult with you, where should they find you? Just send you a DM. What's the best place?
DM me on X. Yeah, that's probably the best place. Is DM. I do check, the other messages too quite frequently. So if you end up there, I'll check it.
Awesome. All right. It's been great talking to you, brother. I know we could keep going for a while.
Yeah, it has been. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Absolutely. This was fun. And then, the listeners, if you guys have questions for Greg, if you want to come back or you want to deep dive on a topic, just let me know. And hopefully we can do this again in the future.
All right. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Adios.
Adios.